Okay, picking up from where we left off, that thimerosal, that's a preservative that is found in a lot of vaccines. It used to be when we had the multi-vial or the multi-dose vials that we would draw multiple vaccines from. So we would have like a vial of polio, and so we would draw 0.5 mils of that vaccine every time we had to give a polio vaccine. Well, a lot of them are now single dose syringes, so they're preloaded. You just have to put a needle on them and give them. And so those ones do not contain those preservatives. For the MMR, you want to wait at least 1 month after getting the MMR vaccine to get pregnant. We're really concerned about that rubella. The rubella is what causes a lot of miscarriages or fetal defects. Select immunizations are allowable during pregnancies and are very much recommended. Influenza vaccine being one of them, and then the Tdap vaccine, which is the tetanus and diphtheria and pertussis vaccine. That one is actually recommended, I think, somewhere between like 32 and 36 weeks or something like that. They believe that passive immunity goes from mom to baby to the fetus to protect against the pertussis, which is whooping cough. Pertussis in adults, extremely annoying. It's awful. I've never had it, but I was at Iowa State for a semester, and there was like an outbreak of it there, and it looked awful. So what is something that is very awful for an adult is actually life-threatening for babies, that they just can't get the oxygen they need. So we need to do a lot to protect babies from getting those types of diseases. Okay, so we're going to summarize the adaptation process between pregnant women and other family members. So maternal adaptation, accepting the pregnancy, maybe moody during that time, identifying with the mother role, society and culturally driven. So what is a mom, what defines them being a mother, goes into what their society and what their culture believes in. So with my culture and my society might be totally different than somebody else from a different culture and different society. Reordering personal relationships. This creates a lot of tension, a lot of conflict. I've told a lot of people over the years that, if you're having a stressful marriage to begin with, and now you think a pregnancy or a baby's going to fix it, you're in for an eye-opening experience, because typically babies put more pressure, more tension on a relationship than anything else. And that increases conflict, just because the things that you want may not be what your partner wants, and that kind of thing. Establishing a relationship with the fetus, creating that emotional attachment to another human being, and then preparing for childbirth causes a lot of anxiety, especially first-time moms. They have no idea what to expect. They think they know, they don't know. And when that don't know and hits, and it's getting closer and closer, and especially if you don't know the gender of your baby, there can be a lot of anxiety, a lot of unknown to it. Sibling adaptation. Having a new sibling in the family is a major crisis for a child, so keep that in mind. It is common to see a regression of behavior. My oldest was totally potty trained. And even when I was in labor with my second kiddo, my oldest was going potty in the bathroom in the hospital room. And the moment that little Ian came into the world, Easton decided he was no longer potty trained. He had major behavioral regression with that. And so that's pretty typical. And, if you're going to do a big milestone like potty training or something, like wait until after the next kiddo is here. Older kids typically resent older kiddos, so meaning once they're aware of how babies are made and where they come from, they typically resent parents' sexual behavior. So they resent the fact that their mom is pregnant, because then it means that their mom is, having sex, kind of thing. Grandparent adaptation. You can have two kind of cases happening here. You can have extreme joy over it, or you can have a little resentment over the child having a child. It's evidence of them getting older. Grandparents can be a great source of advice, because they've been through it before. But there can be a point where they get over involved in pregnancy and childbearing and, raising a child, just because then they think that they almost, it's the know-it-all attitude that goes into it, which can cause strain on that relationship between the mom and the grandmother kind of thing. Paternal adaptation. So we're looking at dad's ability to adapt. Kuvad syndrome, this is where dad starts having pregnancy-like symptoms. They start gaining weight. They start having cramps. They start getting moody. This is that kind of mental behavior and behavioral things that go into it. Accepting of the pregnancy, there's usually an announcement, kind of joy phase that happens initially. And that's typically like, yep, I did it. I did that. It was me. There's that certain kind of little pride in there. There can be an ambivalence to it, like a meh, like, oh, well, that's great, towards a pregnancy, or even anger and violence, especially if it's, if it was kind of a violent situation before, that might increase with this, even if it was something they were looking forward to or stated that they were looking forward to, or just out of fear, just plain old fear of, this next huge phase in life. And then identifying with the father role. What does the father mean? Well, again, here it's culturally and society driven on what is the father role? What does it look like to you? What does it mean to be a father? Kind of thing. Reordering personal relationships, caring for the pregnant partner. There can be some rivalry here. I've had friends that, it's kind of funny, that they don't talk about their pregnancy at all when they're tired, that they just say that they're simply tired, because if they say they're tired because of their pregnancy, then their husbands tend to go, oh, okay, you're making another excuse. So it can create rivalry, or the mom is just so focused on the baby, the dad starts feeling, or the partner starts feeling left out. Same with grandparents, and that kind of thing can happen too, and it's pretty common. But then, there's the other part of it where the men almost become overprotective of the mom to be in the fetus. I've known dads that once the baby's born, they don't want anybody coming to the hospital to see them, that it is their baby. They are in charge. And so they don't allow, grandparents and aunts and uncles and that kind of thing to come to the hospital. So it just depends on the situation and that person. Establishing relationship with fetus. So we want to encourage behavior like rubbing the pregnant baby or pregnant belly with the baby inside, or talking to the fetus. We want to encourage those kinds of things. Those are positive bonding behavior that we like to see. And then preparing for childbirth, becoming unsettled about home, or taking on creative projects. Oh my gosh, my husband is so guilty of this last one here. So he wants to fix about 1,000 things in our house. Every time I was pregnant and gonna deliver, he wanted to fix like the whole house up. And it was like ridiculous. Like, you are one person, you can't get all this done. We don't have the money to do it. It was just a multitude of things. And then I would have like 1,000 unfinished projects in the house. It would be from painting to putting in a door to building a closet, blah, 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 blah. He just kind of this unrealistic, wanting to take on all these tasks. And if it's the Canuck way of doing things, it's not going to get finished. So anyway. Okay, we're going to move on to a section called fetal development. Okay, fetal maturation. Viability, I've talked about. Viability is the capability of a fetus to survive outside of the uterus. Typically, insurance companies are going to recognize 24 weeks. Okay, before 24 weeks, they're probably not going to admit you to the OB unit if you're having issues. You're going to probably stay in the emergency room, or go to like a medical floor, because insurance companies just aren't going to recognize the fetus as being viable before 24 weeks. And then also, this number has changed because of technology and everything. I think your book says 22 to 25 weeks, and that 22, that's really pushing it. I think my cousin said that it was 21 and some odd days, that the youngest that she has seen, and she's a NICU nurse. And it just depends on neuro and lung function, like how the baby is able to respond to needs and actually get those needs met. So fetal circulation is going to be crazy. It is almost nothing like an adult circulation. The heart is the first organ that gets developed. It starts at the umbilical vein, which is O2 rich blood, and branches off in the abdomen. Some blood goes through the liver. Most is sent to the inferior vena cava and to the right atrium of the heart through something called the venous ductus. Okay, I've got a picture coming up. So just, hear these words and just, okay. Circulation passes right through the right atrium, through the foramen ovale to the left atrium, mixes with a small amount of deoxygenated blood from the pulmonary veins. Blood goes to the left ventricle, squeezed through the aorta and to the rest of the body, splitting off to the head and down to the feet. The ductus arteriosus creates a special circulatory pathway to bypass the lungs because their blood is not being oxygenated by the lungs right now. It is being oxygenated through the blood coming from the umbilical cord. So the umbilical cord goes from baby to the placenta through those spiral arteries that I talked about in lab, help perfusion and through perfusion, diffusion, and osmosis get oxygenated blood and nutrients into fetal circulation. And then cephalocoidal, this enhances the head to rump development of the embryo fetus. All right, so here's a picture of fetal circulation and how crazy it looks. Heart rate should be anywhere from 110 to 160. It gets lower the closer you get to term. There's all kinds of wives' tale. The faster the fetal heart rate, the more likely it's going to be a girl. The slower the heart rate, the more likely it's going to be a boy. There is no scientific research that backs that in any way, just so you guys know. So if we look at the heart here, you can see where I've got circled that foramen ovale. So that is what connects the atria of the heart. And it's because the blood doesn't need to go to the lungs. It's not going to get oxygenated in the lungs. So that's why that part is there. The ductus arteriosus is another kind of branch off. Again, it's a way of maximizing oxygenated blood throughout the body and bypassing the lungs. Okay. Ductus venosus, as you can see there, that is what allows circulation to go primarily from the umbilical cord right into the inferior vena cava. Instead of going into the rest of the circulation that would normally be there, it goes into the fetal circulation. So it can go to the heart and be pumped through the baby's body. And so these little areas that are open typically will close after delivery. Some of them close right away. Some of them might take a little bit longer. Some of them you can hear as a murmur after they're born. Things like taking ibuprofen after 32 weeks can cause some of them to stay open longer than they're supposed to. Some of them will have to be surgically fixed. A lot of it just depends on the situation. Okay, fetal respiratory system begins in embryonic life and continues throughout fetal life and childhood. Pulmonary surfactant. So what is surfactant? This is the substance that allows lungs to expand and contract, allows those little alveoli to do what they need to do with expanding and contracting. Determines lung maturity. We can detect surfactant as early as 21 weeks. This is what, when you hear people that are getting injections, helping their baby's lungs get matured, this is what they're getting. They're getting these shots to help promote surfactant to be produced so that baby can be more able to be viable at an earlier week. We can see exercises in the chest wall movement starting at 11 weeks. So we can actually see baby trying to breathe. And when baby is practicing breathing, a third of the amniotic fluid is squeezed out. They're practicing breathing with amniotic fluid going in their lungs, out of their lungs, and a third of that amniotic fluid is squeezed out of the baby's lungs during vaginal birth. So this is the reason why cesarean babies tend to have a lot more respiratory issues, is because that squeezing of the body coming out the vaginal canal is actually necessary to help expel some of that amniotic fluid from their lungs, before they take their first breath. Okay, gastrointestinal. Okay, I am actually going to take a break here, and we will continue this on to the next part.